Welcome to Evolve to Succeed, the podcast that brings together entrepreneurs, founders, business leaders and experts to talk about their journeys and explore the link between personal and business success. I'm your host, Warren Munson, founder of Evolve, a coaching, training and development company focused on enabling business and personal success and creating a community of like-minded individuals. Whether that be through our peer groups, one-to-one coaching, our training and development programs for you and your teams, or through our content and events, our mission is to get the best out of each individual and inspire them to be better both in life and in business. If you want to learn more about Evolve, including our beautiful co-working space in Ashley Cross in Poole, then please go to evolvemembers.com, where you'll find great content, insights, details of all of our services, and also information on our forthcoming events. For now though, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the show. This week I'm talking to Chris Gardenia, founder of Strategic Mentors, which offers strategies for business growth for coaches, consultants and those in the service industry. Chris is also the author of The Busyness Delusion, 12 Secrets to Designing a Smarter Business for a Better Life. And although he aims to help those in the service industry, I promise you this conversation that I have with him during the course of this podcast will help all business owners, entrepreneurs and leaders. We focus on four main aspects: Chris's 3F's philosophy, the 1% principle, the thinking habit, and also the dangers of becoming too attached to outcomes. These are great conversations and I really hope you enjoy the show. Hello Chris, and welcome to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Thanks Warren, good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast. We're going to talk about some of your philosophies and your coaching kind of principles that you apply with your clients. But just for our listeners, Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and the business that you run, Strategic Mentors.
Sure, yes. So yeah, as you say, the business I run is called Strategic Mentors. My name is Chris Gardner, which, if you have ever seen the film In Pursuit of Happiness, do you remember that film?
Yes.
You remember it? So it's a true story, and the guy's name is Chris Gardner. And when that film came out, which was around about 2006, I had people emailing me from all over the world saying, Chris, I am where, they'd got the wrong guy, but, I am where you are. It was a real insight into what it must be like to be a celebrity. The kind of the revelations that people would, the personal stuff they would declare in an email. But anyway, so the business I run is called Strategic Mentors. The website, the main kind of front end website, is the 3fs.com. I'm sure we'll talk about more about what the 3Fs is all about. And we focus on helping service businesses, principally coaches and consultants, people who trade on their IP. Basically, they help clients with their expertise and know-how. We've got methods and structures to help them create a recurring monthly income. So, and again, it all fits into the 3Fs, which we'll no doubt go into in more detail. But basically, we help them build up £5,000 to £40,000 a month recurring income without working so damned hard, which is the key purpose of this.
And what's really interesting, Chris, looking at some of your material, like you say, that we'll cover, and some of the things, the questions that I've got for you, and the discussions we have, is that I found that a lot of those things that you're applying to that your niche client base do apply to individuals generally as they kind of approach and go about their world and go about business, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the public face, if you like, in terms of who we are designed for and the sweet spot. In reality, we help many more than just coaches and consultants, but that's just an easy badge for people to say, oh, I recognize that as me, because the problem that I help solve is particularly acute, particularly felt with those kinds of people, who are basically selling their expertise. Often they're selling their time, which is the key downfall, if you like.
So let's talk about that, and let's talk about the paracetamol you offer and the problems you help solve. But I suppose that kicks in. We've mentioned it. Both of us have mentioned it now a couple of times. It's that 3Fs philosophy. So what is the 3Fs philosophy, Chris?
So how I came about devising what I now refer to as the 3Fs was where I would do talks and presentations to room rooms full of business owners, often solopreneurs, but either that or they've got very small teams. And I would be talking about the idea of busyness as opposed to business. It's the idea of being busy.
Yeah.
And I'd start off the talk by saying, you know, when somebody bumps into you and says, "What do you do?" and you say, "Oh, I've got my own business." And it's like, "Oh my God, that's amazing and fantastic." I know more and more people do it now, but certainly it was not so common. And it takes a special kind of person to back themselves and say, "Yeah, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be responsible for my own life." Yeah. Right. And so everybody in this room is what I would say, and everybody here has their own business. So by definition, you're already quite an extraordinary person. And when they say, "Oh, that's amazing. How's it going?" You know what they're going to, you already know the answer, right? So, how's it going? "Oh, yeah, it's fine, thanks, yeah." And they say, "You're busy?" "Oh, yeah, really busy." And I say, isn't it curious how we've come to use busyness as a measure of success?
Yeah.
Did you wake up this morning thinking, right, okay, so the purpose of today is to be as busy as possible? And of course it isn't. So if that's not the case, if that's not the purpose of your business, what is the purpose? And I'd pose that and let a bit of silence fall in the room. You see kind of,
and the tumbleweed kind of goes
and you
across
get
the audience.
The eye contact starts to break. Some people I'm really not sure about it, I haven't really thought about it. So I came up with this proposed answer to that question, which is the 3 F's. So I would suggest the purpose of a business is not to keep you busy. The purpose of a business is to have these 3 F's, which are financial security, freedom, and fulfillment. So financial security is not very controversial, right? But real genuine financial security, and what that looks like when you don't have it. There's, depending on the audience, so they say, money is like air or money is like sex. It's like it's no big deal. Yeah. Unless you're not getting enough, and so that's sort of one definition of financial security, if you like. What it's like if you haven't got it. And certainly
that's a great. Sorry, just to but that is a great definition. Because as soon as you said it, I said, "Well, the thing I want to ask is, how do you define financial security?" But that is a great definition of it, isn't it?
Thanks.
You know what it is when you haven't got it.
Yeah, right. Because and so I make the distinction between security and wealth.
Yeah.
Right.
Big difference between the two.
There's huge difference between the two, and there's nothing stopping anybody getting the latter, getting to wealth. But you go through the first step, if you like, is to go through the financial security gateway. But to shift from that, the way of thinking that got you to security is different, and it's more constraining than the type of thinking that gets you to wealth or having more. Because one is about not losing, right? One, and the other is winning.
Yeah, it's positively winning, isn't it? Yeah.
So in other kind of alliterations or rhyming, it's one is striving or surviving, and the other is striving to thrive. So depending on how you want to look at it. So that's the first F, financial security. The second is freedom, which again I don't think is very controversial from a business point of view, because if you didn't really want freedom, you could go get a job. You'd have fewer financial roller coasters than being independent and being responsible, a bit of self-responsibility. But that's not something you didn't want when you had a job. There's more than that. You wanted freedom, and then we can talk about this more if you want. But there's a distinction. I make the distinction between freedom from and freedom to, and a lot of the starting point is freedom from having a boss, freedom from being told what to do, freedom from having to be at a certain place between 9 and 5 or whatever the equivalent are, that sort of stuff. And then as you realize, that's like the difference between financial security and financial wealth is like the difference between freedom from and freedom to. So when freedom to is like the freedom to do these other things, the freedom to expand your thinking, to have more of an impact or whatever. Yeah.
But that's quite interesting, because a lot of people do start their own business, and we come across them, and have had clients that their motivation, the prime one of those three, would be freedom, and the last thing they end up creating is freedom, and they tie themselves in knots and handcuffs, and they're actually probably more tied down and have less freedom than if they were employed.
No, completely, and that comes down to the model as well, because, and I'll talk about the third F of fulfillment in a second, but this is, I think, as you go down that rabbit hole, it's a really important distinction, again, a really important point, because when, especially when people start or are running a service-based business where which is my sweet spot, where they're selling their IP, they're consultants, they know how to help people. So how do they charge for that? And so they look around typically and say, well, what do other people do? And they see people quoting hourly rates or daily rates or so much per session or whatever it might be, right? So what are they actually selling there? What they're actually selling, the currency of what they're selling, apart from the cash currency, is time. So they're selling their time.
Yeah, time for money.
So it's kind of interesting, right? So by selling their time, it means they're giving their time to their clients. What does freedom require? It means more and more of time for yourself. So in order to earn more, they have to work more, which in that model means they have to give more of their time to their clients, which means they have less time. They're taking time away from themselves because we all have the same amount of time. So actually, the more you try to become initially financially secure and then financially wealthy through the model of selling your time, the less freedom you have. So
I've got that T-shirt, Chris. Sorry? I've got that T-shirt, Chris. I wish you'd met me 10 years ago. It took me ages to work that one out and shape that and take that T-shirt off. But when started Inspire the accountancy and business tax advisory firm in 2004 and thought, this is it, I'm going to get freedom. And just started selling my time for money. And 10 years in, realised, wow, I've just created the business I didn't want to have.
And that's how we learn, right? That's how we get
it. It is.
Yeah. And then, so just to close the final part on the third F, which is fulfillment. So it's financial security, freedom, and the third one is fulfillment. And a lot of people, when they start getting into the idea of the three Fs, or they start to understand it more, they think fulfillment. Okay, that just means being happy. Yeah, I quite enjoy my work, right? Well, I'd say that was a minimum standard. So it's almost like each of the three Fs have like the minimum and then what it really means. So like financial security really means enough, and then we can have more. With freedom, you can have I've got enough flexibility, and then you can have like loads of freedom and spare time. And the same with the fulfillment. You can have like, I don't hate what I do. So is that fulfillment? But really fulfillment is much more than, it's different from the other two Fs because it's then outside of, the way I think about it is it's outside of yourself. So where financial security and freedom are all about you. Have you got enough money? Have you got the time that you want to be able to do the things you want? So it's all, and put your own oxygen mask on first. It's important to get yourself in a position. And then when you've got yourself in whatever that position is, that strong foundation position is, you then have the opportunity for what I call fulfillment, which is essentially contribution. It's making a difference to other people. It's focusing. Now, in the same way, like you can have financial security and freedom even at the early stages. You can also have fulfillment. You can also make a contribution even at those early stages. So it's partly a way of thinking, but it's taking it beyond the purely selfish with a small s. It's not judgment, but it's the self-centered.
It's what we all start a business for, generally, isn't it? Is those first two?
Put your own oxygen mask on first, right?
Yeah, definitely. I like that phrase too. And so, and do you have people when you talk to them about these three Fs? Clearly, there's recognition there of we've had that conversation, but different people will have those priorities will be different to each of them, won't there? And there'll be a different weighting towards financial security, freedom, and fulfillment. And how do you approach that conversation with people? Or do you think people should have equal buckets?
To be honest, I haven't really thought about, or I certainly don't focus on scale or equality across these three things. Okay. It's more like a sense of, are you okay with how things are? And where you're not for whatever reason, there's an opportunity to, I'm picturing like this is like a graphic equalizer, bass, middle and treble, so you can shift it, each of those. And if one of those is out of balance for where you are right now, then there's an indication of where you might want to tweak a lever, as it were. Because I don't think there is an absolute scale for financial, even the first F, financial security. There's no absolute scale of that, because I was talking to somebody last week who is earning about $15,000 a month, but their bottom line break even is 11,000. They have to have at least 11,000 a month personally for the lifestyle. And for other people, 10,000 a month would be an ambition that today is inconceivable. So it's totally.
And I suppose that financial security one also is stage of life, isn't it? Because some of us start businesses pre-kids,
Yeah.
pre-family, pre your partner, pre your marriage, or whatever it may be, and therefore financial security at that point is a completely different definition than it is when you've got
and it's
family and children and responsibility.
Right, and so actually that feeds into the third F of fulfillment, where it's about outside of self. So pre-kids, pre-partner, marriage, or whatever, it can totally be about, I just want to work, I want to bring in money, a very kind of common psychological state. And then you get into a relationship and or you have kids, depending on when you started. And now the business isn't for accumulation, where or greed, if you like, whatever your motivation was before. It's quite likely, not always, but it's quite likely. So actually, I'm doing it now to provide for my kids, rather than just to have more material goods gains, or success, or whatever that. Yeah, gains. Yeah.
And final question on this, because I'm fascinated. I could talk all afternoon on it, but got plenty of other things to talk about. But do you think they're tradable? So would you say, because there is this philosophy sometimes in that some people would say, life can be a bit like the gas burner. You can't have all four on high. And if you want to put one area of your life, focus on that and put that priority and turn the gas up, you've got to turn it down elsewhere.
Yeah.
Do you think that the financial security, freedom, fulfillment bits are tradable in your kind of philosophy?
My core answer to that, that's a really interesting question, and my core answer to that is absolutely no. Not that they're not tradable, but they do not have to be traded.
Okay, yeah.
It's very often they are traded. And so when I first came up with this concept of the 3 Fs, I actually I set things up, and the structure and how I would help people through the journey was sequential. So the first thing is, let's get financial security in place. But the typical way of doing that was by we would get an offer stronger, so it's more attractive to a particular market and so on. But it was still really hard for the client, for them to change the understanding and the thinking and really embody the whole principle of not selling time, but price yourself in a very different way. Mm-hmm. So it was comfortable for where they were in a kind of business experience or mindset or thinking habit to say, well, actually I'll charge so much per session or so much per day or per hour or whatever it might be. So we could tick the financial security box because they would build a financial model that came in regularly, consistently, and they're secure. But it's absolutely, because of the model, at the expense of freedom. And so what we would then do is shift to a focus on how do we now start to extract yourself from this and increase freedom, right? But it was, as I helped more people through it, I realized that was a flawed or an unnecessary starting point. Let's start by building the model for financial security with freedom.
Yeah.
And the fulfillment is kind of subjective. It's a bit different in that sense. So you can, if you feel yourself, if you feel the work you do really matters for the clients, for the other people, not just to bring in income, but it really matters in the world, if it matters for the people that you help, then that's fueling the fulfillment F, right? But it's absolutely, I feel really clear as I think about the question you asked, that you can absolutely, anybody at any time can have all three. There is no trade-off that's required. There is very often a trade-off that's assumed, and therefore it's natural, but it is absolutely not required. You can have all three all the time.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I can see that and I can understand that, and very eloquently put, Chris. So thank you. So I think you've written a book, The Busyness Delusion. And in there you talk about, you've come up with this term, the 1% principle. So tell our listeners about the 1% principle, Chris.
Oh, okay. So let me start by, you may have heard this question, but when I first heard this question, or heard the answer to the question, I thought, I don't believe that. I don't believe it's true. So I did the math, and it is indeed true. So it's a thought experiment, right? I'm going to give you a sheet of paper, and it's of unlimited size, right? As big as you like. And my instructions are fold the piece of paper in half,
Yeah.
fold it in half again, fold it in half again, and keep going 50 times. Now, I know in practice you can only do it about 8-9 times.
Yeah.
So it's only a thought experiment. So if you could do that 50 times, the question is, how thick is the piece of paper at the end? So firstly, do you know the answer? Have you heard it?
No, I don't know the answer.
So what is your gut instinct? What do you guess? Because clearly you don't know, right? So what would you guess is the answer? And there's no
A mile.
A mile, right?
Yeah.
I've heard people say, oh, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches. People say 100 yards, and they think they're really, expanding it. A mile is one of the bigger ones. I have had someone say like 100,000 miles
To the moon.
right? Yeah, right. So the answer that I did not believe when I first heard it, but it is the case, is 50 million miles.
Wow.
That's the response that I felt, and that I love to hear. Like, what? Because suddenly, internally, your mind just goes, right, what?
Yeah,
what?
I'm distracted now. Listeners, if we don't get any more questions, it's because I'm distracted with that thought.
So here's what. So when initially I heard that, and I thought, wow, that's fascinating. But then I thought, actually, there's some really important points buried within that metaphor, right? So first, there's a couple of things to illustrate here that just walk you through the logic of it, right? So obviously what you're doing is you're folding the piece of paper in half every time, right?
Yeah.
So if it ends up in the scale of 50 million miles, right, and that's on the 50th fold, that final fold added 25 million miles, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Right? So the one before that added 12.5 million miles. The one before that, 6 million, then 3, then 1-ish. So the last 10 or so added nearly all of that massive distance that we've created, right? So I can't remember. So at 40 folds, it'll be at about 500,000 miles. No, 50 million miles, 50 million, 50. So it'll be 50,000. So at 40 folds, it'll be about 50,000 miles. A long way still, but not even to the moon after 40 folds, right? But if this was, imagine this was put, the miles were pounds or something, So in other words, you wanted to get in at the end. I want to have that end result. You might say, well, all right, all the gain is at the end, so I just want to start at number 40. I'll come in, I'll swoop in then at that point, and I'll just ride the final 10. Well, in the real world, because this is only a thought experiment, you can't come in at, well, if it was a business and it was like doubling every month or something like that, and it was over 50 months, you could come in after 40 months, but you'd have to buy your way into that business, right? And then you gain massively, right? So you can buy in conceptually, right? But most people have to start at the begining. Go back to day number 1 or month number 1, right? So now let's look at what that means. We're back at the start. I've given you this piece of paper, which now you understand is a really pretty blooming massive piece of paper, right? In order to be able to fold to that sort of size, right? But now you know that it's huge. So now let's say it's the first fold. Fold the piece of paper in half, right? Well, how much effort is there in folding this massive piece of paper? Huge effort, right? Mm-hmm. Huge effort. Yeah. What have you got to show after for all that effort? Well, not very much. It's still a massive piece of paper, and it's just 2 sheets thick. Okay, well, let's do it let's call them days, 50 days. Let's do it another day, right? So we fold on the second day. Still a massive piece of paper, 4 sheets thick. It's still a lot of effort, not much to show for it. So we do it for day 3, 4, 5. So 8, 16, 32 sheets. There's a lot of effort here going on. And what am I seeing as a benefit? What am I seeing as a result? I'm really not getting very much, right? And so let's imagine day 6, right? You go, well, I really haven't got very much. I put a lot of effort in and I haven't got very much to show for it. Bugger this. I'll go and do something else. I'll go and start another one. So you go back and start folding another piece of paper for someone else, or another project. You go back and start again, right? Yeah. And you're continually constraining yourself to these the early stages rather than the later stages of compounding. So those are really important points to say. Stay in. If you know that you're in the journey, and I use 50 as 50 doublings as an extraordinary example, but even 10 doublings is you multiply by every 10 doublings adds 3 zeros, so you multiply it by 1,000, right? So if you start with if you had £1,000 income, you'd have £1 million income 10 doublings later, right? So the key question then in the real world now is, well, how long is the doubling period, right? And if you does it take a day, a week, a month, a year?
Yeah.
Now, if you had, let's say, a year, and you had and you started, and you only put 1%. This is where we get back to the 1% principle. You only increased your outcomes by 1% every day. So you start off with 100. So day 2, you've got 101. Day 3, you've got 102.1 because you added 1.1 or 0.01. So you are compounding. You're getting the gains there. So after a year, you started at 1 or 100 or whatever the number is. How much bigger are you after a year? And the answer turns out to be just over 37 times. So you're 3,700% more than you were when you started. Yep. And so you've done 37 times bigger by hardly any effort on the one every day. Yeah. The key is not the amount of effort. The key is the consistency of doing it. So now, if you were folding the paper, start to fold the paper. Now, the next day, fold it a bit more. So it's going to take you longer to fold all of that piece of paper in half. But now don't stop there. Don't get fed up with the amount of time it's taken because it hasn't taken you much effort every day. Because it's a cliche phrase, but we massively underestimate or overestimate what we can achieve in a year, but underestimate what we can achieve over a longer period of time. And that's what the 1% principle is all about. So start with 1%. If you do 1% more, not do more, but have more outcome, 1% more outcome every day. It doesn't take much. The compounding effect massively kicks in, not because you've put more effort. No. Because you're getting the benefits are accumulating in themselves, right? So it's not about time. It's not about effort. Having said that, what does 1% mean in time? Well, imagine you're a classic 8-hour day, right? 9 to 5, 8 hours, 8 times 60 minutes, 480. Add another 20 minutes for the day. That's 500 minutes. What's 1% of 500 minutes? Just 5 minutes, right? So can you find somewhere in the day 5 minutes where you're focused on outcome? What extra outcome? Am I going to add another lead in? Add another connection in LinkedIn? Am I going to find another? Am I going to put another offer out into the market? All of these things where the benefits continue. They're not.
They're not time for money again, are they? They are growth activity.
And also,
something that's growth activity.
Like if you ran a TV ad.
Yeah.
Right. Put a TV ad out. As soon as it's finished, it's gone. The benefit's gone. In principle, somebody might remember it, but you know what I mean. So it's dead. So where you're doing these things where the benefit continues and gains, then you can get the 1% principle. So the point is, don't stopping, and so keep going. But also it doesn't need to be a load of effort. It just needs to be focused, smart effort, done consistently. Stop stopping. Keep consistent. The gains will happen.
Brilliant. I love that principle. So far we've had the 3 Fs, the 1% principle.
Yeah.
We're going to now talk about a third concept, which I'm really fascinated about, is a lot of people talk about mindset.
Yeah.
And you actually prefer this term thinking habit.
Yeah.
So let's go and explore that now, Chris. Tell us about the thinking habit, because so far we've had 2 great principles. Let's make it a hat trick and let's talk about the thinking habit, Chris.
Okay. So it's a pure kind of personal bias, this, because mindset is so widely used as a term. It's so widely understood. I say understood. It's so widely recognised. Not always understood. And I just have a slight friction myself with it, with the word mindset, because it has the word set in it, as if it's like fixed. Something is set. So I've got my mind set in a particular way. And so I think of the word and the concept of mindset as preparation. It's like I've got my mindset into this state, into it's like a state or a stance, a place that you're coming from. So it's a preparation. And in reality, we are the sum of our activities, or the outcomes, the results, the rewards we experience are the result of the effort and the activities and the contribution we've made out into the world, right? So in other words, it's activity based, action based, contribution based. And I just find that it's very difficult to have a consistent mindset all the time. It takes practice, it takes work. You can't say, all right, I now believe this, or I now am going to operate like this, and assume you're going to continue like that. For example, how many people would recognize the idea of the imposter syndrome? Right? It's pervasive, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you can. I got ideas and frames to sort of bypass it and overcome it and so on. And you can do that, but until it becomes a habit, a habitual way of thinking, you will succumb again. So it's like fitness, it's like any skill. I think that having, to use the word mindset, I think having a mindset is a practiced skill. The good news is that every skill is something that almost everything that we do consciously is a skill. And and every skill is something that you can learn. There was a time in your life where you could not eat with a spoon.
Yeah.
And you learned it, right?
Yeah.
So everything that we do is a skill and a way of thinking, the way of how we show up in the world, the way that we come across to people. We can allow, if we think, if the imposter syndrome takes over, that's not inherent. It's not real. It's our habit, our habitual way of thinking that's got us into this place. And so the antidote to that is a thinking habit to come out of that place and replace it with something much more empowering. So I'm much less interested in the idea of having a mindset as a pure preparation, but having a thinking habit, which is something that's active, and you're practicing actively. You're developing the skill. You're just becoming better and better, more resilient, or whatever the need is in life.
Yeah, definitely. It's just got that more positive connotation, isn't it? Really, and I think
it's not so
creating a habit. But creating a habit in itself has its challenges, doesn't it? Habit creation. Is a huge subject in itself, and I suppose let's just ponder that for a moment. And I'd ask you, what good kind of tips or hints have you got for people to create good habits?
I would refer to almost like the master of habit creation of James Clear, and Atomic Habits. And it's interesting, he uses the word atomic, meaning as in atoms, as in tiny. It's the 1%. It's absolutely the 1% principle in practice, right? Take these tiny things now. So, and there's what's the guy's name? Is it James as well? Charles Duhigg, I think. Okay. I'm trying to remember the name of his book, but he was like kind of I don't want to say the godfather. He was before James Clear about habit creation, and he talked about a trigger, a response, and a reward. So there are three things, and what James Clear did in habit formation was he looked at how to build good habits. I think first how to overcome bad habits, and then how to build good habits, but using a slightly different frame, but the same principles of trigger. So something that gets you to do the thing, or reminds you to do the thing consciously, doing the thing, and then getting the dopamine hit, getting the reward for doing it. Yeah,
perfect. And just interested because, again, a lot of what you're talking about there's quite a lot of outcome driven kind of talking here. So, but I have heard you talk about the kind of dangers of being too attached to the outcome, especially when perhaps you're putting out your message or you're delivering your content to the world, that you're really always after that outcome. So what are these dangers, and how can we learn to perhaps be less concerned with outcome? Because we all want results, don't we?
I had a good example of this about how can you focus on the things that matter to be most likely to get the results. And when you hear it, you go, "Oh, that's obvious, isn't it?" So let's take anybody who enters an Olympic competition, a race, an event, or whatever it is. Right? Let's assume every single athlete, if we're talking athletics, who enters the 100-meter sprint or whatever, has a goal of winning the gold medal or a medal. So every one of them has a similar goal. But by definition of the event, only one of them can win the gold, only 3 of them can win a medal. So having the goal is not the determinant of getting the medal, because they all share the same goal. So what is it that makes the difference, or what contributes to the difference? And it's the process by which we focus on the process to get there. So one way of looking at this and thinking about this is imagine. Just before I share this bit, there's a really useful concept that I intellectually understood. I kind of got that I know that it makes sense, but I still couldn't make it work for me until the bit that I'll share in a second. So, and this was the concept of the gap and the gain. So anybody who runs their own business, anyone who's entrepreneurial in style or in thinking habit, is to some extent future focused, right? Yep. I'm aiming for something in the future. And that future is like the horizon, because as the closer you get, you can see the next future. So there's always going to be a gap between today and that thing that you're starting to envision and move towards, the goal, right? So there's always going to be a gap between now and then, right? If we focus only on the gap that we haven't yet covered, it's a pretty negative. It's not a most inspiring, motivational type of thing in the sense that we're always falling short, but we always will by the setup, by the definition, right? If we turn around 180 degrees and say, well, actually, what was I like? What was happening? What were the results? Whatever that's important, say 12 months ago or 5 years ago. Have I moved forward? Have I come on? Am I ahead of where I was in the past? And nearly always the answer is going to be yes. And the idea, the concept of the gap and the gain is to focus on, acknowledge and recognize the gain, to say, now use that as fuel and the motivation to say, now I'm going to continue, right? So it's a really useful concept. I would try to practice it, but honestly, what I would tell myself, my thinking habit there would always end up with, yeah, but. So
but I want to be there.
Exactly. Yes, I've done all that.
Yeah,
but I'm not there yet, am I right? So I wasn't finding it. I found it intellectually valid and a good idea, but not practical. It wasn't really helping me. So, but the next bit did. So this is focusing on the process. So now imagine you've got a spectrum from say 0 to 10 of your competence in a particular aspect, a particular skill, right, or way of operating. 0 is I'm utterly the world's worst. I have no idea even how to start, right? So utterly dreadful. I don't mean to sound judgment. I'm just not at all competent.
Yeah.
Right? Depending on your audience, I can go bluer. The 10 would be I am world class. Right. So now, and it's personal calibration. So there's no right or wrong answer. This is a personal decision. So on this, so like people can talk, use this to think about like public speaking or writing emails to your audience or how you show up with a client, whatever it might be, right? But a scale of 0 to 10, where do you think you are now? And you find your answer to that, right? From 0, got no idea, to world class. And let's say you say, well, I'm a 4, whatever that might mean. Yeah. So now the task is not to get to 10 in one step. The task is to get to 5. So what do I need to do to move from a 4 to a 5, from what I call a 4 to what I call a 5? What's the difference? And now, as I'm making progress there, that is progress. That is gain. And it's not just let's look back at where I've been and pat myself on the back, but I'm not where I want to be. But right now, in the moment, I can feel, I can measure, I can tell that I'm getting better. Yeah. And that, when you take all 8 competitors in a 100-meter sprint, what they did in getting from a 4 to a 5 to a 6 to step by step is what makes the difference. What's interesting is that a lot of people will not a lot of people, but it's very common to think, well, oh, I think I'm really pretty good at that. And they get, well, I'm a 7. And maybe they get to an 8. And then they get to a 9. And then as they increase their capability, they increase their awareness of what they don't know and what they can't do. And they recalibrate. So it's quite often in sport, it's really interesting to see what you would perceive as like international, certainly national level operators will calibrate themselves, will score themselves as a lower competence than a much less capable, because their frames are different. So there is no absolute frame. It's all relevant. But the point is, can you make progress?
And when that's why it's such a nice technique, because it's very personal,
exactly,
isn't it? And I get that, and I can see it now, is that, as you said, that business owner, that entrepreneurial spirit is that, where's the next hurdle? How high have I got to jump? But usually we're looking at that, I'm a 4 and I've set my goal without really defining how I get there at an 8 or a 10 even. Whereas if you do that incremental approach, I'm a 4. So how do I get to where I want to be a 5? And then you start to celebrate the successes as well, which is, again, what business owners are really bad at. You know what I mean? And again,
sure.
We'd all recognise that is we don't celebrate our success.
No, indeed, absolutely right. And also, there's an echo. It's not quite the same, but there's an echo to the 1% principle. Going from a 4 to a 5, it's like folding that piece of paper again. It's like, but it's only a 5. Yes. But it's a 5 on a journey to a 6. Yeah. It's a 6 on a journey to a 10. So this is progress. And it's not blowing smoke up your ass. It's not saying, oh, well done, keep trying. This is saying, actually, I'm really, this is really genuine progress. Yeah.
But with the bigger picture in mind,
and
that you want to become world class, but step by step, you're going to get there and celebrate the successes along the way.
Yeah.
Wow. I've had a thoroughly enjoyable conversation, Chris.
Likewise.
We've covered 4 really key kind of areas that I think, that would clearly pay dividends and benefits to your core niche audience. But I think any business owner listening to today's conversation will get benefit and gains out of everything we've talked about. It is the Evolve to Succeed podcast, though. So let's just turn the spotlight on you slightly.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, what's your personal definition of success?
I think there are different ways. It's like the freedom from and freedom to. There are different aspects to success. There's work success, relationship success, all sorts of things. But fundamentally, for me, I've done a lot of work, like personal development work, and I've come down to having 3 core values. So it's almost like a GPS, triangulation of this. Okay. So my 3 core values, and then I can apply that to life. And am I operating in life? Is everything operating that's aligned with these 3 core values? So for me, my 3 core values are love, learn, thrive. Each of those 3 words mean quite a lot to me. But love is active and passive. It's giving of love, and it's being loved. The same with learn. It's learning as in absorb and take on, but also someone said to me years ago that they said if they cut me through the middle like a stick of rock, they'd see the word teacher. So I can't not do it. And so for me, learn is both me learning, receiving, and also teaching. So love, learn, and thrive. And thrive is my code for 3 F's of what we've been through a bit today. And so for me, my definition of success is a life that's aligned with love, learn, thrive. There is nothing special or right about those 3 words. Let's just say it was non-trivial. It was a long, really, to me, fascinating. But if anyone can find your core values in whatever that means to you, and then live life according to those, there'll be flow, there'll be peace, there'll be purpose. That's my definition. So I don't think there is a definition. There's my A, but there's not the definition.
No, definitely. And it's why I end every podcast with that question, because you get a different answer every time. There's some common themes, but you've definitely taken time to get to where you are in life to have considered that, and it's something by the sound of it is a mantra that love, learn, thrive that you live your life by.
Yeah, I try. Yeah.
Chris, it has been great to have you as a guest. If our listeners want to learn more about yourself or strategic mentors, where can they go?
The first place it is the 3fs.com. That's the number 3fs, so hence the 3fs.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm active there. I'd love anybody to connect with me there. Just reach out and connect. If I can
get the right Chris Gardner.
Yeah, and yeah, that's right. and it's Gardena. It's the one. It's Gardena with an E. There's various spellings of that. So yeah, LinkedIn and the 3fs.com will be the place. There's and on the 3fs.com, you if you do the 3fs.com/book, I think, or should look it up really, but you'll find a link to the Busyness Delusion book that I've written, and you can get download of that if you want.
Perfect. Thank you for being a great guest on the podcast, Chris.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Warren. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. My hope with every episode is that you've learned something new or heard something that challenged your way of thinking and further motivated you on your path towards becoming a more knowledgeable, informed, and inspired individual and business leader. If you enjoyed this episode, then please help us by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. We really value your feedback and would love to have you along for future episodes. And please don't forget to learn more about Evolve by going to evolvemembers.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.